Good evening. My name is Sophia Lee, and I'm the co-president of Oxford Speaks. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. Please take note of the emergency exits behind you, and please keep all cell phones on silent. Note that this event will be live streamed on our Instagram account at Oxford Speaks. Finally, I'd like to thank the Mathematical Institute for hosting us, and to the university proctors for helping us with the handling of this event, along with Ehud Olmert himself and the team. This event is part of our broader speaker series regarding the Israel-Palestine conflict. Please note that Oxford Speaks does not necessarily endorse the views of the speakers. Our commitment lies in fostering constructive dialogue and promoting understanding, recognizing the inherent challenges of navigating discussions on the sensitive yet pertinent topic. We encourage respectful audience engagement with our speakers during the Q&A session. Today we are joined by Ehud Olmert, who served as the 12th Prime Minister of Israel between 2006 and 2009. Ehud Olmert was elected as Mayor of Jerusalem in 1993, unseating a long-time predecessor, and was the first member of Likud to serve the position. Before becoming Prime Minister, he served as Deputy Prime Minister under Ariel Sharon between 2003 and 2006. In 2006, Olmert became Prime Minister, serving until 2009. His tenure saw Israel engage in two conflicts, the Second Lebanon War and Operation Cast Lead. Additionally, he is known for coming closer than any other Israeli Prime Minister in securing a political settlement and end to the Israel-Palestine conflict, something which I hope we'll be able to discuss further. Since leaving office, Ehud Olmert has been an outspoken critic of Benjamin Netanyahu. He has objected to the judicial reforms proposed by the Netanyahu government in 2022, and has become increasingly critical of the incumbent's conduct in the ongoing war in Gaza. Ehud Olmert will give some remarks on the contemporary state of Israeli politics, the endgame of the current hostilities, and the road, however narrow, to lasting peace, drawing on his decades of experience in Israeli politics. After doing so, my co-president Sam Zia and I will engage in a moderated Q&A with Olmert, followed by audience questions. Many thanks in advance.
Here?
Yes, please.
Hi, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'm very happy and honored to be invited to speak here. These are not easy times for us Israelis. I guess these are not easy times for those who are traditional supporters of the State of Israel. And I can imagine that it is not even easy times for those who don't like us and have a lot of criticism on what's going on here. So I'd like somehow to address myself to where we are now and where we want to be. But I have, for the sake of transparency, say one thing which is very significant for me. I'm not a spokesman of the State of Israel. I'm not. And I'm not a spokesman of the Israeli government. In fact, as Sophia said already, I'm not known to be a supporter of this government. In fact, I'm very much in opposition to this government. But I'm not in opposition to the State of Israel. I'm wholeheartedly, fully, entirely in support of the State of Israel. But I'm not a spokesman of the State of Israel. The war on the following the events of the 7th of October became inevitable. I don't know of any country in the world which would have tolerated the vicious, brutal slaughtering and beheading and raping and killing innocent civilians and not react to it. Now, one thing must be clear. The difference...
Ehud Olmert, you are responsible for the crimes that you just said. You are responsible for the killings of thousands of Palestinians, of Lebanese. You are responsible for the displacement of 1 million Lebanese refugees. You are responsible for the creation of the Dahiyya Doctrine, which is being implemented in Gaza. You are an architect of the genocide happening in Gaza right now. You yourself said in 2007 that without a two-state solution, then the state...
I'll be sitting here and waiting, okay?
You know that a two-state We are all Palestinians. In our thousands and in our millions, we are all Palestinians. There will be an end to the apartheid regime. Justice will be brought to you. You will be brought to justice for your war crimes, for the thousands of deaths that happened at your hands, for the millions of people displaced under your rule. And the 5 million stateless Palestinians will have a right to return. The apartheid regime will fall. The apartheid regime will fall. The apartheid regime will fall.
Okay, thank you very much. Very impressive.
Hurriya, hurriya.
Very impressive.
Intifada.
Listen. You talk almost as long as I'm going to talk. So shut up, sit down, and now listen to me. I listen to me. I listen to you in a very.
There can only be peace when there is justice and a right to return.
I listen to you in a very respectful
You are the
manner,
architect of the Palestinian genocide.
which quite frankly you don't
Be
deserve.
brought to justice. You will be brought to justice, and the apartheid regime will fall. The apartheid regime will fall.
I tell you something, I once used it when I was speaking in one of the American universities. And almost also the president of the university came to me at the beginning and said, listen, you must understand there is a little bit of unrest in the audience. They are going to demonstrate and may stand up and say few shout things against you, take it easy. So, I went to the lecture and there were a couple of hundred of them, and some of them were shouting, and then I said to them, hey guys, you must understand something. For someone that has been a graduate of 9th term in the Israeli Knesset, this is nothing. This is nothing. I'm not even impressed. So if someone wants to shout now more, do it now. Or let me speak. Okay, so I said, I don't think that any country in the world would have tolerated the terrible events, atrocious events which took place on the 7th without reacting. Now, the difference between this particular event and anything that has happened between us and the Palestinians in both ways, both what we did to them and what they did to us until then, is that never before was there an attack that was aimed at killing and butchering and beheading innocent people in their homes, in the living rooms, in the bedrooms, in the safe rooms, as it was done on the 7th of October. I don't say I am the last one to say, in fact, I have sacrificed my political career fighting for an entirely different pattern of relations between Israelis and Palestinians. And we made many mistakes, and they made more, and many innocent and non-involved people in the past suffered from these confrontations between us and them. Never was there an attack in such a brutal, atrocious way that was aimed not against military targets, but against babies, against innocent people, against civilians, not in a military compound or the military base somewhere, but inside the living rooms and bedrooms. People with pajamas, babies with pajamas, were butchered and beheaded. So there was no way that Israel could have not reacted and trying to reach out for those who were responsible for perpetrating these atrocities. Now, I want to make it, we can waste this opportunity of talking by going into all the details. I want to say this. Hamas is not just an enemy of the State of Israel. Hamas is the enemy of all the moderate Arab countries. Hamas is the enemy of the Palestinian Authority. I would remind you of what happened in 2007 in Gaza when Hamas was attacking the leaders and members of the PLO in Gaza, and they did to them more or less what they did to us now on the 7th of October. That's how they took over the leadership of Gaza in 2007. Hamas is the enemy of Egypt, of Jordan, of the Palestinian Authority, of the Emirates, of the Saudis, of the Bahrainis, of every moderate Arab country. And while all of these countries express a degree of discontent, which I can understand, coming from where they are and how these events affect the public opinion of their countries, at the same time, there is nothing that they want more than that Israel will destroy the military capacity of Hamas. Because in as long as there will be Hamas and Islamic Jihad and Muslim Brothers in any of the Arab countries, there is no likelihood that there will be peace between Israel and the Palestinians. And I, as someone who criticizes his own government, not the others, for not doing enough in an attempt to change the balance between us and the Palestinians, one thing must be clear, understood, and accepted. There can be no peace between Israel and the Palestinians. There will not be a resolution for the historical conflict between us and them, no matter how much we will try and how much some of them will try, in as long as the Palestinian society will not be grossly dominated by extremists, fundamentalists, radicals, messianic forces that are prepared to do anything. The truth is that Hamas never wanted, never complained, never ever complained for not having peace with Israel. The Palestinian Authority has its complaints. Some of them are justified, many of them are not. I'll talk about it later. But Hamas never wanted to make peace with Israel. Never even argued that we are not making the necessary adjustments that they would expect in order to settle the conflict between us and them. For them, the conflict can't be settled. There is only one resolution for the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians in the eyes of Hamas and Islamic Jihad and the Muslim Brothers and the Iranians. The destruction of the State of Israel. The killing of all the Jews. Therefore, it is not something that can be done now or at any time in the future that could bring the two sides to a reasonable compromise that will settle the conflict, because they are not interested. They are not interested, they don't want it. They want one thing, the disappearance of the State of Israel, and that will never happen. However, I have to say that while I think that we had to make a counter-offensive of Israel against the Hamas, I know, I'm fully aware that such an event causes a very significant collateral damage, and that many, many non-involved and innocent people suffer from what is accepted, not just by us here in Israel, in your country, your government, which traditionally was not always very, very open-minded to the security needs of the State of Israel. Present government of Great Britain, in the most explicit manner, supported the Israeli reaction, the counter-offensive, the right of Israel to react, the right of Israel to fight, and the need to do everything to reach out for the Palestinian, for the leadership of the Hamas in order to eradicate Hamas, in order to create the necessary platform that will perhaps bring us towards some kind of mutual accommodation. And the same is America, and the same is France, and the same is Germany, and the same are Italy, and Holland, and Sweden, and the Czech Republic, and so many other countries. And yes, I know that when you are fighting, particularly in urban centers, as Gaza is, perhaps one of the most crowded places in the world, and the terrorist organizations, as a matter of pre-planning, is having all their headquarters, all their bunkers, all their launching pads inside the city, in the center of the city, in order to try and use the population as a human shield to prevent the inevitable and necessary reaction by us in order to stop them. So what I want to say, I didn't come here to apologize for the Israeli reaction. I'm proud of the spirit, of the courage, of the dedication of the Israeli fighters that sacrifice their lives on a daily basis in order to reach out for the Hamas leaders and at the same time to take all the necessary precautionary measures in order to avoid, to the extent that it is possible in the complexity of this situation, the hurting of unnecessary, non-involved civilians that are suffering, and that we are fully aware that they are suffering as a result of this. The question is, where do we go from here? And this is where, up until now, I am entirely speaking for the overwhelming majority of Israelis. From here, there are some differences. I personally think that what we have to do is, number one, we have to announce that at the end of the military confrontation, which hopefully will take place very, very soon, we will stop the battle and will try to reach out as a first priority the return of the hostages. Presently, there are 136 Israelis. When I say Israelis, I mean 2 babies, one of 1 year old, celebrated last Friday his 1 year old birthday, another one at the age of 4, many young children, many elderly people, 86, 88 years old, which were abducted and are kept in the tunnels under the most terrible conditions. Altogether 136. Every day that passes, some of them may die. In fact, we are now not confident that we have more than half of them alive. And therefore, as a first priority, at this point now, what we have to do is to stop the fighting and have an agreement that will allow us to bring back all the hostages. And then we have to, and if necessary, that we will even pull out some of our forces from Gaza, I think that we have to do it. I know it's not easy to say it, that's not to you, but to the Israelis. It's not easy to say. And I say it publicly, all the talk shows in the media. And it definitely will leave Israel with a sense of defeat if we will not be able to completely eradicate the Hamas as the Israeli leadership has promised from the outset. But if I have to choose, as a human being, as an Israeli, the lives of the hostages or the pride of victory, the pride of victory is the return of the hostages alive into the state of Israel. That's number one. Number two, Israel will not remain in Gaza. I think that there should be an international force that will come and take place instead of the Israeli military. I don't think that any of the Palestinians or the Arabs forces will be ready to take over Gaza from the Israeli violence. So there must be, for an interim period, a military intervention force that will take over and try and stabilize and provide the platform for a new civil administration to Gaza, and will start to work on the rehabilitation and the rebuilding of Gaza. We did it in 2006 in the south of Lebanon. Part of the resolution 1701 of the United Nations was the introduction of the international intervention force of NATO countries that was brought over to the south of Lebanon, and later there was change in the makeup of that force. But for 17 years, there was not one bullet shot across the border from Lebanon to Israel as a result of the 2006 military response to the terrorist attacks by Hezbollah into the state of Israel. And that is what I think we should do now. Israel should pull out international force of countries from Europe which have no traditional hostilities and violence with the Palestinians, will take over in order to bring a certain degree of stability and balance into this area. And at the same time, Israel should make an announcement that we are prepared to start immediate negotiations with the Palestinians for a two-state solution. Now here I want to say something. Believe me, there is no one in the state of Israel that criticized in the most outspoken manner the Israeli government and the Prime Minister that I did over the last 15 years, since I stepped down and Netanyahu took over. But I can't hide, and you should be fully aware that in 2008, beginning of 2009, a comprehensive peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians was presented by me to the Palestinians, and the core of this plan was a two-state solution on the basis of the 67 borders. And part of this plan was that the city of Jerusalem will be divided, and that the Arab part of Jerusalem will be the capital of the Palestinian state, and that the Holy Basin of Jerusalem, including the old city, including the Temple Mount, will not have one exclusive political sovereignty. The Israeli sovereignty will be removed, and that there will be a trust of 5 nations. 3 Muslim countries, the Saudis, Jordan, and Palestine, together with Israel and America, that will be authorized by the UN Security Council to administer the old city as a free, open city for all believers without any one exclusive political sovereignty. There will not be an Israeli flag on the Temple Mount. There will not be a Palestinian flag on the Temple Mount. The Palestinians, the Muslims, will be free to come to the Temple Mount anytime they want to pray and to practice their allegiance in the mosque. And the same are the Jews and the Christians. everyone, without an exclusive political sovereignty. And the fourth principle was that the issue of the Arab refugees, which was hanging over the Middle East for generations, will be resolved within the framework of the Arab League Peace Initiative, which was originally approved in 2002 in Beirut and was reconfirmed in 2007 in Riyadh. These were the four principles. It answers all the demands and all the desires and all the expectations that the Arab made for generations. And I presented it as the Prime Minister of the State of Israel officially to the President of the Palestinian Authority. And you know what happened? He disappeared. He never came back to say, does he accept it or does he not? I think I have a good reason to say that right now, and for many years since then, the Palestinians, the leaders, including the President of the Palestinian Authority, understood that they make an historic mistake by not responding to this dramatic, far-reaching peace plan that was initiated by Israel, not by the Palestinians, but which answered all of the demands, the historical demands, about Jerusalem as the capital, about the Temple Mount, about the 67 borders. There would have been some slight modifications. There will be certain parts of the territories of the West Bank, 4.4%, which would have been annexed to Israel, and a comparable sized territory from what Israel was before 67 would have been added to the Palestinian state. And another thing, in one of our discussions, Abu Mazen, President of the Palestinian Authority, said to me, I want the 67 borders precisely as they were. Not a millimeter change. So I said to him, you know what, President, I'm ready. But in that case, Gaza will be a separate state and the West Bank will be a separate state. There never was any geographical connection between Gaza and the West Bank. He says, no, this is impossible. This is part of the Palestinian state. So I said, then you want to change the borders. Okay, if you want to change the borders, I'll tell you. We'll make some changes. On the basis of the 67 borders. And the connection between the West Bank and Gaza was supposed to be a highway of 40 kilometers. That will go from Gaza to the West Bank and will make that connection so that Gaza will remain part of the life of the West Bank and vice versa. Until now, Abu Mazen never said no. Never said no. But until now, Abu Mazen never said yes. And since then, of course, many things changed. And now, it is a lot more difficult for all of us to come back to what then was the golden opportunity of making peace between us and the Palestinians. However, I haven't changed my mind. I think that what we did in order to destroy the Hamas military power was inevitable, was essential, was a prerequisite for any movement towards peace between us and the Palestinians. Now that we have destroyed most of it, I don't know if all of it, but most of it, and I think that it is quite clear that we have destroyed most of the tunnels and most of the bunkers and most of the weapons and so on. This is time for Israel to move forward and to be prepared to negotiate a Palestinian with the two-state solution. And I hope that the Palestinians will have the leadership that has the courage and the determination and the vision to move along in the same path. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I hope that you will give the record to this noisy guy. So he will know some facts. All right.
Thank you, that was very interesting. I just want to start, I think we're going to start with, can everyone hear me, first of all? Can you hear me? Great. I think we're going to start with a discussion of the current conflict, and then we're going to go back and maybe have a historical discussion, and then we'll open it up to the audience. But as I'm sure you know, the scale of the casualties and the destruction that has been wrought on Gaza over the past 3 months is just, it's just unparalleled. You're looking at, if we take the IDF's own figures, so we just take them at their word when they assume that, as militaries tend to do, they're not exaggerating. They say they've killed 9,000 Hamas fighters. That would mean a 70% civilian death rate. If we take the Euromed Human Rights Monitor, which is an independent human rights organization, they say they've killed 2,300 militants, which would be a 92.1% civilian death rate. And
92 of what?
of total number of casualties, 30,034. So I just wonder, when you hear those statistics, is there any part of your mind that thinks, no, this can't just be a war against Hamas? Something has gone very badly wrong in the way this war is being prosecuted.
I want to say 2 things, or 3 things. Number one, quite frankly, without trying to argue or to deny or to ignore or to overlook any figure, how do they know how many people were killed? Do you think that there is someone reliable and credible that is checking there and counting there and taking care of the bodies to start with? So I allow myself to be somewhat skeptical about the numbers. That's number one. Number two, I think there is more likelihood that the numbers that Israelis are presenting are probably, they are also, I don't know to say that they are completely accurate. I don't know, but I think that they are more reliable, okay, than the other figures. And number three, yes, if you ask me, is something going wrong? Yes. Heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. I know you wouldn't believe it and you think, oh, you say this is maybe propaganda, but believe me, I have people in Gaza that I'm familiar with, that we have been helping with in medical treatments over the years, that are calling us and asking for our help, and we're trying to do everything in order to support them, and I know what they have been through. And for me, I don't need to have 20,000 or 30,000 or 92 or 75. One baby, one, that was killed by an Israeli is one too many. That's what I feel. And this is a tragedy, because everyone understands that we had to react and to make the counteroffensive in order to try and get rid of these brutal terrorist organizations which has built a whole city underground with billions of dollars of investments of all kinds of governments, of the Qataris, of the Iranians, and so on and so forth. And that it has to be done in the center of city, which is one of the most crowded cities in the world, where there are so many thousands of civilians living, and we try to move them out in order to make them safer in the context of this conflict. And I know that many of them suffered. And I am really, really sad, and I feel terrible about it, and I don't know that I have a simple answer that can make a good explanation for everyone that cares for the life of these people. I don't think so.
Yeah, I guess just the thing that a lot of people have asked us to sort of talk to you about is that, do you still have confidence that this is an operation against Hamas? 122 journalists have been killed in the past 3 months. 69 were killed in World War II. And regarding your point about the death count, that the US administration has expressed confidence that the numbers that are being between 25 and 30,000 are either accurate or actually an undercount because they don't include people in the rubble. So I guess to return to the original question, you do still have confidence, despite some of the commentary around other powers, that this is a targeted operation against Hamas. You don't think Palestinian civilians are being targeted by the IDF?
No, I say that Palestinian civilians suffered and were killed, and many of them were not involved. I don't deny it, I don't overlook it, I don't ignore it, I don't argue about it. When you say that so many hundreds of journalists were killed, none of them was a registered journalist in any publication which you are familiar with or that I'm familiar with. There are Hamas members that were designated as journalists in Hamas websites, and now you're talking about them being killed. Look, let's try and be as careful and as sensitive as we can. And I said, I can't argue about numbers, I don't want to argue about numbers. I say, I admit that I am fully aware that many innocent people were killed as a result of this very complex situation that was forced on us. We didn't volunteer it. It was forced on us, and it caused a terrible massacre of thousands of Israelis. I have no doubt about it. As to the numbers and the figures and the number of journalists and all of these and this, simplistic comparison in the Second World War and the number of journalists was one journalist that works for any international or media or magazine or television station and so on and so forth that was recognized by this organization to be their workers was killed. I don't know, maybe there were a few, I don't know. But this is nothing, in no comparison to the numbers that you have just mentioned.
Sorry, just one final bit, I'll turn to Sophia. I think we agree that innocent people have died. I think that we can agree. I think the question is not about have innocent people died. The question is about, do you still have confidence that the IDF is not targeting civilians in light of the fact that the combatant to civilian casualty rate in this conflict has eclipsed any conflict basically since World War II? You still have confidence in light of the urban warfare that's going on?
I know that the natural temptation is to try and draw comparisons. And you're doing it with the Second World War. I don't want to find myself there, but I think it's a corner away from no matter what you say, no matter what you do, you're not in good shape. So it just happened that lately I've been reading a couple of books about the Second World War, particularly about the Far East, and how many hundreds of thousands of innocent Japanese were killed in one night of American bombing. Believe me, more than the people that live in Gaza. But, I prefer not to go into this because, as I said before, I do not argue. I recognize, I regret every individual that was killed when he was not fighting for Hamas but was entirely innocently uninvolved. At the same time, I'm absolutely certain that the Israeli army has not targeted civilians in purpose. That I'm sure about. I have not the slightest doubt about it. Were there civilians killed in spite of the measures of care that were taken by Israeli fighting units? Yes. Many, perhaps. Too many, definitely. Am I sad about it? I am sad about it. I'm not like Hamas, the Hamasnik who called his mother from the house of a family that he butchered and he said, "Mom, I killed 10 Israelis. I butchered them. I raped them. I'm so happy." And she said, "Go on, do more." That is them. That is not us.
I understand that.
sometimes when they agree with what I speak. I was very patient when this lunatic was standing there, hiding his face. Why did he have to hide his face?
You should ask him.
No, I know. I can't ask him. You know, he was there. Anyway, thank you.
I did want to ask, sort of following a similar line of questioning. Netanyahu said in 2019, and I'm quoting, anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state had to support bolstering Hamas and transfer money to Hamas. This is part of our strategy to isolate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank. And I understand that your opinion is separate from that of Netanyahu's. Do you think that Netanyahu's final goal is perhaps includes targeting of the Palestinian people?
Listen, if you can, do me a favor. Don't force me to say something good about Netanyahu. It is extremely difficult for me. Okay? Look, Netanyahu, obviously, I said it time and again in many interviews in the BBC, in ITV, in Channel 4, in BBC Radio, in all the other networks in the world, so I don't find any reason to hide it. I think that really Netanyahu has decided in a very calculated manner to prefer flirting with Hamas instead of supporting the Palestinian Authority, because talking with the Palestinian Authority may have inevitably led to political discussions that will require territorial concessions that I thought are inevitable, that are necessary, that will serve the interest of Israel in a very positive manner. Now, since he didn't want it, he preferred to deal with the Hamas. And he helped the Qataris to bring to Hamas billions of dollars over the years through the assistance of the Israeli bureaucracy and authorities. And that's why, not only because of this, but also because of this, I'm extremely in opposition to Netanyahu, and I'll do everything in my political power to get rid of him as soon as possible. And when asked, even during the war, are you ready to get rid of the Prime Minister in the middle of the war? I said yes, because he's more dangerous to Israel than Hamas. Okay? So that's as far as how much I support Bibi Netanyahu. But at the same time, to accuse Netanyahu for wanting deliberately, in a calculated way, to target innocent civilians amongst the Palestinians is an exaggeration which I can't subscribe to. Okay?
And if we look at sort of the ICJ case and the case against Israel that it's perpetuating a genocide, I'm assuming you don't agree. I'm assuming you don't agree with the case that South Africa's brought. So
not only I disagree, also the International Court of Justice didn't agree. With all due respect. They were asked to announce that Israel is committing genocide, and they refrained from doing it because they didn't agree with this charging.
Yeah. Well, yes. So they haven't made a final sort of announcement yet, because that takes that process.
So if they didn't make an final judgment, and they were presented with all the possible evidence to the South African head, certainly you are not supposed to offer a final judgment.
No, I certainly won't. No.
I was just careful to remind you.
But can you understand why, sort of in the international opinion, given some of the comments that have been made by senior ministers in the Israeli government, just that Benjamin Netanyahu on October 28th quoted Amalek, you must remember what he did to you. Yoav Gallant called Palestinians human animals on the 15th of October. Isaac Herzog said that this rhetoric, quote, about civilians not being aware, not being involved is not true. They could have risen up, they chose not to. Can you see why people, perhaps or perhaps not in this audience, or among the international opinion, has sort of bought into the idea that Israel may be committing a genocide, even if that proposition isn't true, or even if you disagree with that proposition?
insist, huh? If someone amongst those would have first of all say what the Hamas did in the 7th of October is a crime against humanity, then I would have been ready to listen to them. I don't remember that South Africa said anything of this nature, or any of the ones that you quote from those who criticized the state of Israel. I, for instance, said last Friday, don't, distance it to the past. On last Friday on national television, in a prime time, I said, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and all these Messianic guys are enemies of the state of Israel. All right? So we don't look at these guys not as part of the mainstream of the Israeli narrative, but enemies that we have to get rid of politically and to remove all the trace of influence that they may have. We have a political debate, a very serious political debate, which we are waging now. But we do not support these guys. We think that they are against the government, and one of the reasons why we think that Netanyahu has to be removed is precisely because he's cooperating with them and they have a different agenda.
I would like to ask a bit about mainstream opinion in Israel. Gallup polling from the 22nd of December 2023 says that 1 in 4 Israeli adults currently support the existence of an independent Palestinian state, while most, or 65%, oppose it. And this is almost a complete reversal of where they stood on the issue a decade ago, when twice as many Israeli adults supported an independent Palestinian state as opposed to one. Has this conflict totally radicalized opinion on both sides? And is it necessary to reduce radicalization on both sides in order to achieve peace? And if yes, what measures should be taken in order to reduce radicalization?
Look, it's true that in the past there was a larger support for a two-state solution amongst the Israelis. In the most natural, inevitable way, one has to understand that in the darkness of what happened in the 7th of October to the Israelis, there is almost a spontaneous natural reaction of many people that say, hey, if they are going to have a common border with the state of Israel with hundreds of kilometers, not just in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, maybe we don't want to have it. It will change. It will change, and we'll do everything in our power to change it. How many Palestinians are there? What is the percentage of Palestinians that support the existence of the state of Israel? If you run a poll, you will have a similar numbers on the opposite side. So there is a problem. There is a problem amongst us. There is a problem amongst the Palestinians. And I'll tell you what it takes. It takes a strong, determined, and courageous leadership to do the thing which is not seen to be popular, but which seemed to be essential. I used to say something, and I quoted Ben-Gurion. Ben-Gurion was the greatest leader, the creator of the state of Israel. I used to quote him and say, I don't know what people want. I don't know. They may want this or that, they may have one opinion poll that shows this and the other that shows that, I don't know. I know what they need. And what we need is a Palestinian state next door to us, alongside the state of Israel, living with us in peace, and with patience and tolerance. And we living next to them with patience and tolerance. And what we need to do is to try and do that which doesn't seem to be acceptable now and change the public opinion. I usually say that I try to advise some of my followers and those who are in the high positions in government. I said, look, the greatest testament for leadership is the ability of a person to do the opposite of everything that he ever promised, if he thinks that this is the right thing to do now. And I can give some examples. Menachem Begin, all his life, and I had the distinct honor of being with him. I was a member of parliament already second term when he was elected prime minister, and I worked closely with him. Menachem Begin all his life talked about annexing all the territories in the West Bank and in Sinai, and he said that when he will retire, he will live in the settlement in Sinai which was built before. And what did he do? He pulled out from every centimeter of Sinai and gave it all back to the Egyptians and recognized Sinai to be an Egyptian sovereign land. He did everything, the opposite of everything that he promised. And this was greatness. And he never ever attempted the annexation of the West Bank, even though he said the West Bank is part of the land of Israel, of the history of Israel and whatnot. Never did. Why? Because when he became prime minister, he understood that sometimes you have to do the opposite of everything that you promised, because this is the right thing to do now for your country and for your people. And therefore, when you ask me, what is the public opinion now? I can't argue. I don't know. There is one public opinion that says this, the other says that. Maybe a majority of the Israelis are now reluctant to accept the idea of a two-state solution in the darkness of what happened just lately with the Palestinians in Gaza. And the same are with the Palestinians reacting to the Israeli attacks in Gaza and whatnot. I don't know. I don't want to argue about it. It takes leadership, strength, political vision, and determination to be unpopular when it matters for the future of your country. I hope that our leadership will be, and that the Palestinian leadership will be like this.
Yeah, and if we just move to maybe sort of how that two-state solution could potentially come about. I mean, it must happen. I suspect, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you agree that the first step has to be a new set of elections in Israel. A two-state solution will not come before that. But in terms of the specific issues, I wonder if a two-state solution is even possible. There are 700,000 settlers in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and the Israeli political system, it doesn't seem as though a two-state solution, perhaps on either side, is really on the agenda. How do you think, how do we get the two states? Is it international pressure, or does it have to come from within?
Number one, nothing will be simple, and nothing will be smooth. It will require a lot of working and battling and arguing, and I think that it therefore will take some time. But I think that there is no alternative. There is no alternative. At the end of the day, when I argue with some of my Israeli friends who are so wrong as to disagree with me, I ask them, okay, we will continue, we will destroy the Hamas, we will annihilate Hamas, there will not be a Hamas. What are we going to do with 5 million Palestinians? Are we going forever to be occupiers of 5 million people without freedom of movement, without freedom of speech, without political rights, human rights, civil rights? And you think that this will be acceptable by the international community? You think that Israel will not have to pay terrible prices for doing something which is so outrageous and unacceptable? So the two-state solution, as impossible as it appears to some today, will become inevitable, and therefore it will eventually be. Now, of course, we need elections. We need elections for many reasons, not just because of the Palestinian issue. We need the elections because we have to get rid of this government, which is the lousiest government we ever had, and we have to have a different government with different people, and they will become more responsible, more compassionate, and more tolerant to Israelis within Israel who disagree with them, and also to our neighbors. Now, how it will be implemented, look, the number of Israelis living in the territories is much smaller. Now, of these, about 300,000 live in Jerusalem, that in the neighborhoods that were built after the annexation of Jerusalem, and this has been accepted by me and by the Americans and by the Palestinians, that these neighborhoods will remain part of the state of Israel. Therefore, we don't have to evacuate any of those who live in those neighborhoods. And when I speak about 4.4% that will be annexed by Israel, it includes all the neighborhoods across the Green Line in Jerusalem, okay? So number one, we are practically talking about a much smaller number of people that live in territories that will have to be evacuated. Now the 4.4% of the territories in the West Bank that will be retained by Israel, and as I say, a comparable size territory inside Israel prior to 67 will be then swapped to the Palestinian state, so that the basis size territory will be equal to the 67. In the 4.4%, we can relocate all those that will live in territories that will have to be evacuated. Now, in the 4.4% of the territories that will be retained by Israel, there are also a couple of 100,000 and more. So the number of people that will have to be relocated is much smaller than 100,000. And this is something that still can be possible and hopefully will become practical. The sooner, the better.
And in your speech just earlier, you're talking about the hostage deal, you want hostage to be returned, and you called for an end to the fighting. But are we not in a situation where Netanyahu has no incentive to accept a hostage deal for forcing fighting, because it would end his political career? And his political alliances may leave the coalition who does do a deal. So how do you see this ending?
You decided that you want to hear everything that I may have to say about Netanyahu before I leave? You will not leave everything apart? Look, there is a debate. It's been said time and again about Netanyahu. He is reluctant. I don't want to judge him here. I want to say this. Whether he likes it or not, we'll force it. The public opinion of our country will force it. And I hope that it will be soon.
I think we're going to turn to questions and then kind of...
They seem to all agree with me, so I don't think...
Can we just... Yeah, the girl... Yeah, you, sorry, that's what you're wearing.
Can you hear me? Hello.
Yeah.
I think you can hear me. Sir, thank you for your speech. First of all, I would like to express that I am a bit disappointed by your reaction to a protester, because she has a right to protest, and your reaction towards her was graceful. She is, first of all, a member of, a student of University of Oxford. So she's one of us. Please do not insult us.
He's a member
Please do not insult
of the
us.
University of Oxford?
Yeah, please do not insult us at our home. I would just like to start with that.
I didn't hear, I'm sorry. I'll give them another opportunity to applaud you if you repeat what you say, because I didn't hear. I know that you like him, but what else?
Yeah, we'll get you a microphone for the next question. Could you just say your question for now, please?
I was thinking about, like, the aftermath of the current situation. How do you think the next government will persuade Palestinians who suffered as much as, like, Israeli people? How would you persuade them not to participate to more radical groups? You know, because, like, you have stated that many people were massacred at the both sides, and how would we persuade
Did I
them?
say massacre? I only say massacred when the Palestinians massacred Israelis. Don't put words into my mouth. Excuse me. No. Excuse me for a second. Excuse me for a second.
Thank you.
I have to ask my question first.
I know. But you have to be honest,
Thank
and
you.
you are not.
I think, sorry everyone, we're just going to wrap up the question now, briefly,
It
and
is
go
like,
respond.
how do you think you can establish a peaceful environment after both sides like severely suffered? Like, what do you think the next government will impose a policy upon them?
Did you
Can I answer this? Number one, I don't know if you noticed, you probably was not here when this guy was disturbing me.
I was.
Excuse me, now you say that now it's my turn, right? So let me say, I don't remember that I disturbed him. And for 5 minutes he was standing there. I'm a guest here. I was invited to speak. And you said that he's part of this organization or a community that invited me to speak. And for 5 minutes he didn't let me say a word, and he was cursing me and spreading lies that are entirely baseless against me. And then what did I do? I seemed not to be too much impressed by him. And I don't know why do you think that this is unfair. I think, and you shouldn't be disappointed. Where you come from, believe me, where you come from, you say that you come from Turkey.
Yeah, please do not use that.
Excuse me, why can't I use it in the country where you come from? If someone like that would have done it to a former prime minister, believe me, you will never see this, the light of the sun for many years. So this is the difference between you and me. And how do I know that? How do I know that? How do I know that? Because I know a Jew tape Erdogan very well, and I have to say
You would get along with them.
I have to say to his credit that he made an exceptional effort on my behalf to broker a peace deal between me and Syria. Unfortunately, just as the Palestinians, the Syrians declined. Now, I want to answer, finally, also the question. And the question that she wants that I will influence the Palestinians not to be pissed off with Israel and to be ready not to commit atrocities and to try and, adjust to the requirements of peace negotiations. I suggest that I will use all of my power of persuasion to convince my government to do what needs to be done. And I suggest to some who sympathize with the Palestinians to go and work out there and influence them to listen to my voice rather than to fall in love with those they disagree with. If they will fall in love with what I say, there is a much greater chance that we'll come to terms.
I think, Malik, if we come down to you and the yellow goals.
Thank you. You referred to the dead Palestinian children and civilians as, correct me if I'm wrong, very significant collateral damage. And you expressed your sorrow at the loss of those lives. But I wonder if Hamas operated internationally and took a primary school in New York City hostage, would we accept the bombardment of that primary school on the grounds that the American children inside it were being used as human shields? Would we call them collateral damage? And do you think that Israeli society in general has a problem with this kind of dehumanizing language being used about Palestinians? And do you not agree that we don't place, as an international community, the same value on Palestinian civilian life that we would on American life, or that we do on Israeli civilian life?
I don't know on behalf of who you pass this judgment. I don't know, so I don't want to, to go into an argument with you. I can only say this. When leaders of all the civilized countries of the world, America, Great Britain, France, Germany, Holland, Italy, all the others, democratic countries, say that Israel has a full right to react in what happened, in view of what happened, of this terrible massacre of Israeli innocent civilians by Palestinians? Did they think that we can do it and that there will not be any non-involved people that will not be heard, considering the fact that all the headquarters of these organizations are in the center of towns which are densely populated? So that means what? That we don't care for the Palestinians? Did we bomb one hospital? You know that they bombed their hospital and immediately spread this rumor that this was done by the Israeli planes, and it was found out that this was a bomb that was shot by them on their hospitals, and they spread that 500 people were killed. Not even 500 people were there.
Sorry, are you denying that Israel has bombed any hospitals in Gaza?
Yes, only when, yes. I didn't.
So no hospitals have been bombed?
No, we didn't bomb any hospital.
Okay, so
We penetrated into the hospitals. We found bunkers with weapons, with missiles in these hospitals. We found remains of Israelis that were killed, innocent civilians that were killed in these hospitals rather than being treated in these hospitals. We never bombed from the air any one of them.
So can I ask you, how many functioning hospitals are there in Gaza right now?
yeah, so
More than there are in London, you'll be surprised. There were 19 hospitals. 19 hospitals in Gaza.
and then we're going to move on to the next question, but I do, because we are a society, we don't sort of, it's my job to sort of give this context. I think you were referring to the Al-Shifa hospital attack.
Pardon?
I think you were referring to the Al-Shifa hospital in the comment you just made. And
No, the Al-Shifa hospital, we penetrated into
Yeah.
the hospital with our soldiers and ground forces. We didn't bomb them from the air. We penetrated them. We found many Hamas fighters inside the hospital. We found bunkers with weapons in the hospitals, and so on and so forth. Not one person of the staff, of the patients, and of the physicians were hurt in this operation.
well, on the 21st of December, the Washington Post published an investigation of that attack, and it did say that the claims made by the IDF about the extent to which Hamas was embedded were, to quote them, deeply exaggerated. There are also no longer any functioning hospitals in the Gaza Strip. So I do think that context is helpful, but I'd like to come to this gentleman.
Listen,
Yeah,
you say,
yeah,
I have enormous respect
yeah,
for the Washington Post.
yeah.
Even the Washington Post sometimes make exaggerations. Believe me.
Right.
Okay.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm happy to. Hi, Mr. Olmert. I've got a question about radicalisation of Palestinians. So, I want to talk about the different ways they're being radicalised. So, like, I agree with you, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad are definitely radicalising them. I went to Jenin, to Nablus, to Hebron this summer, spoke with the young Palestinians there, and when they talk about their children, their families being killed, their friends being killed, that's obviously another way people are being radicalised. But I want to move to something that you would have played a part in with regards to, think about the Palestinians maybe who were born in 2000 to 2005, the second Intifada, and they grow up after you pull out, supposedly in 2005. In 2006, after the elections and Hamas are elected, Dov Weissglass, one of the advisors in your government, he said that the sanctions you put in place in February 2006, this is before Hamas have got rid of Fatah in the Gaza Strip. He said that the sanctions your government placed were like being in a meeting with a dietitian. We have to make them much thinner, but not enough to die. Was your policy with regards to the Gaza Strip, even before you declared it hostile territory in 2008, if you're a Gazan child growing up after the second Intifada, yes, you've got Hamas radicalising you, yes, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, but when you hear comments like that from people inside the Israeli government, what do you think a young Palestinian child is going to think?
We have somebody who try to put things in order, okay? Dov Weissglass was the assistant of Sharon. I took over on the 4th of January 2006.
He was talking about this in the measures you took
Yeah,
February
but he
2006.
was not in the government. He was not. You know, I tell you, I'm not trying to hide.
But he's
Now,
respectable enough. Yeah, he's.
I listen to you. I listen to you.
Yeah.
Now, I agreed in 2000, in the elections were, I think, on the 20th of January 2006. And I agreed that one of the demands of the Palestinians was that the Jerusalemites would have their polls in Jerusalem, in the east side of Jerusalem, and they would participate in these elections. And I agreed to it, even though I was criticized by the Israelis that recognizes that the east part of Jerusalem is not really ours, which subsequently, as you know, I have also proposed to the Palestinians part of the peace plan, as I've just now outlined. Now, I want to say this, look, never anyone that is part of the Israeli government in my time, and I can speak only in this respect in my time, okay? I can hold responsibility for this. No one at the time that I was Prime Minister in my time would have said anything similar to what you have quoted, because you would have been pushed out, thrown out immediately from the government. No one was supposed to speak like that, no one was supposed to act like this, and that was not part of the policy of my government, okay?
And can I say, in 2008, I know this is after you declared it hostile territory, and so, like COGAT, the administrative kind of department who were letting things in and out of Gaza, they had rules on what was allowed to come in and out of Gaza. You said this. You said yourself, and I understand this is coming from a head of state against kind of a territory that you've declared as hostile. But you yourself said, we have no intention of making their lives easier. We will not allow them to lead a peaceful life. We have no intention of making their lives easier. We will not allow them to live a pleasant life.
Look.
But what can I say if I'm a young Gazan child growing up after the second Intifada and I hear what Vice said and what you said? What do you want me to think?
I want you to open your mind.
I've been to Palestine, I've been to Snow.
Hang on. You asked me a question.
Yeah.
Give me the opportunity to answer you in a respectful manner. That's all. Okay. In August of 2005, we pulled out completely from Gaza. All right?
Thank you.
The disengagement was pulling out completely from Gaza. It is not true. Okay.
Did you still? We do need to move on from this question. So I'm
No.
going to respond and then.
Listen.
Yeah.
Were you controlling what was coming in and out?
But this is precisely your problem. You see now, you don't even listen to the end of the sentence, or already you are infused with your answer. I'll tell you what happened. I'll tell you something, and I hope that this will be an appropriate answer for you, although I don't think that you are open to listen. When we were discussing the disengagement, we decided that we would destroy all the settlements that we evacuated, 17 settlements, and we would destroy all of them. And then in the close select committee of the cabinet ministers, a question was raised, what about the synagogues? And we decided we'll destroy the synagogues as well. Destroy everything and move out. Chief Rabbi of Israel came to the Prime Minister and said, how you Jews dare to destroy a synagogue, a holy site? You are not supposed to do it. Sharon summoned us again, we were about 5 of us, the senior ministers, and he said, we are going to leave all the synagogues as is. We will not destroy them. Okay? The day after we pulled out, the Palestinians and the Hamas destroyed all of them. And now you come to me and you ask me, why did I say that we will not make their lives so pleasant? Okay? Ask yourself.
Okay. So that actually brings us really nicely, because we do want to cover to the operation in December of 2008 that you authorized, CAS-led.
Yes.
There was, I've actually been asked by several scholars about this, and we discussed this. I'm not going to name them on stage, but there was a ceasefire between June and it began in June of 2008 between Israel and Hamas that was brokered by Egypt. In the first 6 months of 2008, the monthly average of rockets from the Gaza Strip was 179. Between July and October, that dropped to 3. That being said, Hamas could not stop other Palestinian militant groups, or chose not to, depending on, I suppose, your characterization, from firing rockets into Israel. Why in that November did Israel choose to break the ceasefire, and do you have any regrets about the ensuing loss of life that took place?
Number one, it was not in November. It was in December.
Right, but the first Israel, sorry,
Excuse me.
I'm just, yeah, please.
I can understand he's sitting a little bit at a distance from me, so he's becoming impatient, but you have the opportunity to ask me in between. Look, from June to November, there were daily violations of the tahadiyah that was accepted between us and the Hamas through the Egyptians' assistance. And we, all the time, we said, okay, let them see if they can control it, and we passed messages in order to try and stop it. On the 14th of December, they started a barrage of rockets, and more than 60 rockets were shot at Ashkelon and Ashdod and Beersheba and all the others through 2 or 3 days. That's when we decided that the agreement was violated and that we had to respond. Now, I can tell you only this, that at the end of the Caspian operation, the leaders of Great Britain, France, Germany, Italy, the Czech Republic, and Spain. The Czech Republic was at that time the president of the European Union. All came at 24 hours after the Operation Caspian was ceasefire. All of them came to the residence of the Prime Minister of Israel, and they spoke in front of all the networks of the world and said Israel had the full right to do what they did. This is my answer.
I was going to say, I said November because on the 4th of November, the IDF launched a raid into Gaza, and it's disputed as to whether that was to stop the building of an offensive Hamas tunnel or something else. So I'm just going to say that for the record. But
all through the period from June to December, Hamas was shooting day in and day out.
that's good for us. Maybe, and then we'll come over to that side after.
Thank you for coming this evening. We've talked a lot about how we try to broker a deal with Palestinians, with Syria and so on. And while obviously it would require a very strong leader on the Israeli part to pursue the negotiations, at the end it takes two sides to form a deal. So how do you envision, trying to talk with someone that doesn't always necessarily want to talk with you? Like what will you take also on the part of the other side?
I'm sorry, it's not clear what you say, so I can't understand it.
I can repeat it if you just want to say. Why don't you say your question sort of in 2 sentences and then go ahead?
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
We talked a lot about broken deals with Palestinians, Syrians, and so on. However, other than the Israeli side, there's obviously also their side. So how can you necessarily get someone that you don't always want to talk with you, so to speak?
How can you bring the Palestinians, I think this is what he's asking, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, in light of everything that's gone on the past 3 months, how can you get a side so hostile to Israel to come to the negotiating table?
Look, how can we convince the Israelis to try and get over what they've been through, and how can we get the Palestinians to try and get over in spite of what they've been through? There are two sides here, and the two sides are in the same place emotionally. They are absolutely devastated from our side. The difference is that politically, for the Palestinians, there is no future in as long as the Hamas is in a dominant charge any place. And they know it, and we know it because we communicate with them. I can tell you this. I am on a continuous contact with Palestinian representatives on the higher level in order to find out some common platform that can advance the chance of negotiations. It's true that we have to do the same in our side. And I said before, the initial spontaneous reaction of the public opinion in Israel was obviously very hostile to the idea of now talking with the Palestinians. But we have no alternative, and what we have to do is to try and explain to ourselves that we have no alternative, and try and explain to the Palestinians that they have no alternative. And I think that with the assistance of the Americans, the British, the Saudis, the Emirates, I've been around in the last couple of months speaking to some of them, not to all of them. Obviously, I can't give you the details. In trying to advance them and to push them and to convince them to make every possible effort in order to convince the Palestinians. Had the Palestinians say, which they never did, by the way, ever, if they will ever say, for instance, if now, what I know, he thinks, if Abu Mazen or any one of his senior guys will say, yes, I think that the Olmert plan is a basis for negotiations. By the way, what Gordon Brown said just the other week in a big interview to The Guardian, he said precisely the only plan on the agenda, on the table, which is reasonable and acceptable, is the Olmert plan. And he said, I'm ready to try and work as he did, by the way, he helped me in 2008 with the Saudis and the others. So if the Palestinians will say, now there are many Israelis that say what I say. If there will be one senior Palestinian that will say, we are ready to negotiate this plan, it will make a big impact. I hope so.
Can we go to you, Blue?
Mr. Olmert, thank you for being here. What would you say the next stage of Gaza governance looks like, given that negotiating with Hamas as an elected governmental body is impossible, given that they're a terrorist organization? What do you think Israel's plans, and how do you think the situation will look in terms of the governance of the Gaza Strip going forward?
And just in the interest of time, if we could take your question in the green as well, because I think we're going to do two. If it's okay with you, we'll do two questions at a time to try and get through as many people as possible. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, thank you for coming here. I'm sure you're aware of the South Africa case at the ICJ, and in that case they played a video of Israeli soldiers, the video confirmed by the IDF, where they're shouting, wipe off the seed of Amalek. They similarly say there are no uninvolved civilians, and similarly they say there are no innocent civilians. This coincidentally appears, I suppose, after Netanyahu has commented on Amalek, saying to the Israeli people, remember what the Amalek have done to you. And for context, the Amalek are the people who, in the Torah, the Jewish holy book, it is said that they are the enemies of the Jewish people and that they are ordered to exterminate them. So with this comment in mind, and having what you said earlier in mind, that there has been no deliberate targeting of innocent civilians, would you agree that there are, in the minds of some of the Israeli soldiers, a belief that there are no innocent Gazan civilians, and that this mindset is in part caused by the rhetoric of Israeli officials such as Netanyahu? And if you do agree, how can you brazenly say that no innocent civilians are being targeted?
I say, I'm sure that you heard me, I say that there were many civilians in the Palestinians, amongst the Palestinians, that were killed unjustly. That they were not involved and they were killed. And I'm sorry for that. And I really am sorry. And I said, I don't care about numbers. One is one too many. That's number one. Now, all of these quotes that you read were presented to the International Court of Justice, and they refer to these quotes, if you will recall, and that they say, and they are not made up of supporters of Israel, most of them, okay, that considering all the circumstances and all the information that was brought, and all the details that were presented, that there was not a policy of targeting. Could it happen that there was a specific unit made up of few soldiers that at a particular time, at a particular place, were targeting innocent civilians without any sanction, without any approval, without any official knowledge of anyone? Maybe. I don't know, and I am definitely, as I said, I regret it and I apologize for it and I'm sorry for it. And they were, by the way, court-martialed. These soldiers were court-martialed by the Israeli army. It would never have happened in this Hamas, obviously. But so, question is this: do we take such an event, and particularly after it was observed and reviewed by the International Court of Justice and was not found to be a basis for a policy of the government or of the army to target innocent civilians, but may have been...
The South African case was not asking...
Don't listen. Not one answer can fully satisfy all the doubts that you may have. But you have to teach yourself to be a little bit patient when you ask a question, particularly when all of these quotes, as I say, were presented to the Supreme Court of, to the International Supreme Court of Justice and were not filed to establish a basis for what you are claiming.
Former Prime Minister, with all due respect, the case was not, the question was not asked to the High Court.
Thank you.
I know that you will not agree with me. But at least you have to respect yourself for being able to listen to something that you disagree with, as I listen to you. But you were not invited, and I was not invited to have a private debate with you. You asked a question, you asked your question, I gave you an answer. I think that my answer was very powerful and convincing, and it seems that you do not agree with me.
Thank you. Before we get...
Yeah, I'm sorry. You asked me about what can we do.
What does the next stage of governance?
I think I said it before. I think what we need to do now, and this is what I'm trying to do in my country, and I'm trying to influence my public opinion, and I'm trying to influence the powers that be in order to make it. We need to come now to the Americans and to the British and to the Europeans and say to them, look, you want us to pull out from Gaza, and we need to pull out from Gaza. You want the Palestinians and the Arabs to take over Gaza. They will not do it. They will not do it now. We need, for an interim period of time, another power that will take over the civilian control in Gaza in order to stabilize it and balance it. And this has to be an international intervention force of Europeans and Americans. Similar to what they did in the south of Lebanon, which made a dramatic impact there for many, many years. So right now, at this stage, this has to be the next step. And Israel has, and I said Israel, okay, has to make an official announcement that we are prepared to embark on negotiations with the Palestinians for a two-state solution right away. Okay.
Can I just clarify with you on this purely factual basis? The ICJ traditionally...
What is the ICJ? I'm sorry. I don't
the ICJ, sorry, the International Court of Justice.
Okay.
Sorry, thank you.
Sorry, yes.
The ICJ traditionally does not rule within a few weeks as to whether genocide is being committed. So the hearing they had a few weeks ago was not designed to say yes or no, genocide is being committed. That process takes a number of years. The hearing they had a few weeks ago was designed to ascertain whether preliminary measures that South Africa requested should be imposed on the state of Israel. Do you accept that? Just as...
The International Court of Justice, had they been presented with enough compelling facts they would have said, yes, you have to stop the war right away. They didn't say that.
So they didn't call for a ceasefire, right?
What?
They didn't call, okay.
Okay, this is very significant. They didn't impose ceasefire, which they could. In spite of what happens in Gaza and in Khan Yunis and in Sajaria and in all the other places, they didn't impose ceasefire. That's number one. Number two, as I said before, there's no question that many innocent civilians were killed as a result of the Israeli operation. There has not been a policy of targeting innocent civilians. There was not a policy, and no one has established any initial proof that there was, in spite of what he wanted.
There he is. Okay, can we come to you, please?
I can also just be super loud.
Go for it.
Okay. So you emphasize the importance of leadership, that we need to have strong, determined, courageous leadership on both sides. And from Israel, I'm in agreement. And obviously Hamas, I agree, also is not that. And you say that regarding Gaza, that has to be a coalition of sorts and lots of different partners have to come to the table. But if we're looking at, as the audience, as seeing your prime ministership as, if you're the one speaking clearly, you think that what you did toward peace would be an example. I would argue that partnering with a boss, someone who has given money to the families of terrorists who have killed Israeli families, I would argue that that's also not a partner for peace. So how do you respond to people, or how do you respond to me, who says that your past efforts of partnering with a boss were perhaps not?
You let me wait almost 2 hours before someone from the right. Excellent. Look, I'll tell you something. I'm not trying to justify neither them nor him, okay? And I always say, sometimes when I argue with my Israeli friends, I say there is a problem that not all the Israelis are fully aware of the fact that Abu Mazen has never been a member of Likud and has never filed to become a member of any Zionist group. He's our enemy. He is an enemy of Israel. He doesn't like us. Most likely he hates us. That's something that I expect from the outset. He doesn't support us, he doesn't like us, he's not a Zionist, he doesn't want to be a member of Likud. He is a proud Palestinian and he wants to have a Palestinian state and to exercise his right for self-determination. And much as I don't like him, and much as I don't like their policies, and much as I don't like their practices, particularly with regard to the terrorists or supporters of terrorists, who else can I talk with in order to make peace? That's a very difficult question, I know. So, unfortunately, some of my enemies are not nice. But in comparison to the others, they are possibly the best candidates for peace negotiations. Now, one thing I have to say for Abu Mazen, even though he may not admit it now, on a daily basis to this day, the security forces of the Palestinian Authority cooperate with the Israeli Secret Service formally and handling Palestinians that are suspected by them to be involved with terror to the Israeli authorities to be court-martialed by the Israelis. This is what Abu Mazen is doing, side by side with things that I don't like. So if I have to take him and compare him to whom? To the Hamas, to the Islamic Jihad, I say he doesn't like us, but he is possibly the best candidate, the best available candidate for peace negotiations.
We have again, please.
Thank you very much.
Don't be from the right.
No, don't worry. Definitely not from the right. This is a question about justice, and you've previously talked about the International Court of Justice. Earlier today, I learned from the Metropolitan Police Investigative Department for War Crimes that you would be here today. And this is specifically relating to Operation Cast Lead and the allegations of war crimes, which include the use of white phosphorus on civilian populations, collective punishment, indiscriminate killing of civilian populations, some of which is evidenced by testimonies of IDF soldiers exactly, and also the use of human shields by IDF soldiers. So you've cut short trips, or you've prevented travel to Brussels and to other places before. How come you feel comfortable coming to the UK, where we also have a rule of law, and we can prosecute you under universal jurisdiction? There's Thames Valley Police outside. Are you going to go surrender yourself to them afterwards?
Do you want them to do it? You want them to arrest me now, to investigate me?
I would have personally gone to the court and requested your arrest warrant if it was legal for me to do so.
So why did you come to listen to me if you think that I'm such a criminal?
You deserve a defense. Everyone deserves a defense. Everyone deserves a defense.
Ah, but you have already convicted me before I was even indicted.
I said allegations.
Ah, I see. Okay, this is, you know, in a pure soccer stadium language, I would have said what I think about this. But I'll be polite and reserved, so I will not use this language. The fact is that this was investigated by the United Nations bodies. It never was appealed to the International Court of Justice. As I said, the leaders of all the countries which you are part of, probably, I don't know, you're British, right? You're not?
Yeah.
You are. The Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, was 24 hours after the custody operation there was a ceasefire announced. He came to the residence of the Israeli Prime Minister and in front of the networks of all the world saying Israel was doing the right thing. So this is the judgment of Gordon Brown, of Angela Merkel, of Sarkozy.
But no judge.
Sorry.
Pardon?
But no judge.
I know that there are no judge. You are a judge.
But can I just follow up, because I want to come to the girl in blue sweater right in a minute. But you know, reading your book, there is a pattern that some perhaps can't help coming from. I mean, you opposed Begin's peace with Egypt. You opposed the Camp David Accord. You didn't go with Ehud Olmert to Camp David.
I didn't oppose the peace treaty, and it doesn't say so. It says that they didn't support the Camp David agreement, because I then...
Right, you didn't go with Ehud Olmert to Camp David when he asked you to, as mayor of Jerusalem. And then you...
What does it mean?
Well, it's not for me to say what it means.
What does it mean? I was not a member of the government, I was not a member of this party, I was not supposed to be part of the official deciding body, and I didn't go with Barak to Camp David, that's right, so what?
But you were asked. You agreed that you were asked to go.
I was asked to go, and the Prime Minister refused to tell me what he's going to say in Camp David. So I said, no, with all due respect, I'm not a member of your party, I'm in another party, I'm the mayor of Jerusalem. You want me to come to Camp David without knowing in advance what the policy about Jerusalem will be? So I refused to do it because of reasonable reasons, but what does it mean?
Hi, I'm Gal. I was wondering, looking back for your 2-year peace process with Abu Mazen, if there's anything you would have done differently, and then anything that we can take away for future negotiations, what we could do better in the future.
I don't know, to be honest with you. I think I did everything one could do. I met with Abu Mazen 36 times. Aside from, the Annapolis conference, which was in the middle of this process, we started the negotiations on the 23rd of December, Saturday night, at a dinner in the residence of the Prime Minister in Israel. I have a funny story about it, but I'm not sure that this guy would be ready to listen to it, because he seems to be very outraged to see. We had a problem. I invited Abu Mazen to visit with me in order to start the process of negotiations. Every time we set up a meeting. In the last couple of hours, there was a telephone call cancelling it. Why he can come, he's this problem, that problem, he's got to go there, he's got to go here, you know, all kinds of excuses. Finally, we made this appointment for dinner at the residence of the Prime Minister of Jerusalem, in Jerusalem, and we decided no matter what, he calls, he says he's not coming, we will do everything in order to make sure that this time is going to happen. Sure enough, Friday, the 22nd, 11 a.m., Saib Arikat calls and he says the president wants to speak with the Prime Minister. So, okay, and then the president says to me, you know, I'm going to I wish I could make it, but tomorrow afternoon I have to go to Gaza because the Hamas is going to give me Shalit and give back Shalit, and I'm going to take him, to bring him. I said, President, there is no way that Hamas will give you Shalit. They will give me Shalit before they will give you. They want to make you a hero amongst the Palestinians, amongst the Israelis. I mean, forget about it. Anyway, it lasted for 45 minutes. Nothing happens. He's very firm that his refusal to come. So I figured out, you know, what shall I do? I have to use some extraordinary argument out of the box. So I say to him, you know, President, I think I understand you. You decided to insult me, and you take this opportunity that you see how much I want you to come, now to say to me, never, I will not come, no matter what, I will refuse to come. And then I said, you know what, I understand it. What I don't understand is why did you decide to insult my wife? I said, your wife? I don't want to insult her. I said, what do you mean? You know, I told her 48 hours ago that you're going to be our guest for dinner on Saturday, and she's standing in the kitchen for the last 48 hours and cooking for you. And you want to tell me that this will not insult her? It was quiet for 10, 15 seconds, which is a lot under the circumstances. And then he said, I'm coming. So sometimes you have to use extraordinary arguments. But to tell you that there was something of substance, fundamental, that we missed, I don't know. I know one thing, that I heard from the most closest persons to Abu Mazen, okay, for years, that they think that this was the greatest blunder in the history of the Palestinian people, not to say yes to this plan.
And can I just follow up with that before we come to some final questions here? What do you say to the argument that, without wishing to cause offense, by the point that this offer was made, you were basically a lame duck prime minister? You had already and your proteges were simply unlikely to retain power. By accepting the deal, Abu Mazen would basically put a stake in the ground as to what the Palestinians were willing to accept and create a benchmark under which future Israeli governments negotiating would have to go under, right?
This makes the mistake even greater. Why? Because imagine that I'm stepping down and the next guy from Israel says to Abu Mazen, excuse me, but the plan that was presented to you by the Israeli Prime Minister, we disagree with. Abu Mazen would have become the hero of the world. He would go every place, every corner of the world and say, here is the plan that I accepted, the Israelis presented me with, and now they ignore it. He could have won twice. A, he would have been the side that is ready to make peace, and B, will not have to make anything.
Thank you very much, Mr. Olmert. One thing that we have not really talked about is Iran and the problem of a two-state solution, in the sense that how can Israel and the international community make sure that a future Palestinian state, which I'm sure is possible, is an Arab state of the kind with which Israel can maintain peaceful relations, which is also possible, as we see in the case of Egypt and Jordan, the UAE, Saudi Arabia.
Look, life is not simple, and political solutions are not absolute. And there are always insecurities and grey areas which we have to deal with. Part of the agreement between us and the Palestinians, I mean part of the draft that, that I can say more. Part of the draft which has been fine-tuned over the last few years and the last few months between me and the innermost circle of the Palestinian leadership. Okay, I'm not talking about the history only. I'm talking about now. Part of it is that there is a complete agreement between us and them that the Palestinian state will be non-militarized. They will only have security forces appropriately equipped for day-to-day security. But no army, no tanks, no planes, no nothing. So that's number one. Now to say to you that it provides full guarantee that there will not be aggressive attacks and violence by the Palestinians from the West Bank as was from Gaza. I always say, if someone dreams that on the day that we will sign a peace agreement with the Palestinians, the next day the violence will disappear completely, is dreaming. Unfortunately, 56 years or 57 years of occupation also leaves a certain impact of bitterness and of insults that will definitely be carried on for a while. A year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, it will not disappear on the spot. Israel is strong enough to be able to deal with it. And we have to take the risks. We have to take the risks. No one can guarantee us absolute safety. But I think that the damage caused to Israel by continued occupation is greater than the risk that needs to be taken in order to separate from the Palestinians.
A lot of other questions. I might come to you in the black,
Hi, so I just wanted to ask about the peace plan process that you spoke about earlier, because you mentioned that it would include 4.4% annexation of the West Bank.
4.4%. 4.4%.
Okay. Of the...
And a comparable sized territory will be swapped from Israel prior 67 to the Palestinian state.
Okay.
So it will be, the size of the Palestinian state will be identical to 67.
But it would still annex the Israeli settlements that were built and established there.
You didn't hear
Which,
you didn't hear me.
Yeah, I did.
I say that all these settlements, which will be in areas that will not be annexed to the state of Israel, to the 4.4%, will be dismantled, will be evacuated.
Okay.
It's just you in the orange, I think. Yeah.
Arafat walked away from peace in 2000, and Abu Mazen walked away from peace in Annapolis. I wanted to ask you, why do you think that is, and could it reflect a deeper reason than just failure of negotiations?
I think that fundamentally Arafat, I wouldn't say Abu Mazen, but Arafat never wanted to separate from the image of a freedom fighter. He was not Menachem Begin, who was a freedom fighter before the creation of the State of Israel and became a statesman. He remained a terrorist in his heart, and he wanted to end his life as a terrorist, not as a statesman. That's why he didn't agree to the very bold initiatives of Barak in 2000. You know, I'm not a great fan of Barak, but I have to give him that credit. It's true, I turned down his request that I will come with him to Camp David in 2000 because I didn't feel that I know what he's going to offer, and I didn't think that I can just go like that. But Barak proposed to Abu Mazen more far-reaching peace plan than any before him. I took it 2 steps further, or 3 steps further than Barak. But what he proposed to Arafat was a basis that was acceptable to the Americans and to Clinton, and he begged Abu Mazen to agree, and Abu Mazen didn't, because I think that deep down he still wanted to be a freedom fighter rather than a terrorist, rather than a statesman. Now, I think that Abu Mazen is different. Abu Mazen was against terror, even in the worst possible days during the Second Intifada, when every day there was a bus exploding in the center of Jerusalem, or a coffee shop, or a school, or whatever. He was against it. It required a great deal of courage in the context of this environment to step out publicly and say that he's against terror, which was perpetrated and organized by Arafat. Okay? So I think that his case is more complex. He was not ready to sacrifice his political life as I think. Because at the end of the day, that's what broke me down. And he didn't want it.
I think we'll come to you and then a final question. Yeah, go on.
Thank you. I understand, Mr. Olmert, that in your early years you had personal connections with China. And I'm wondering that in the years ahead, what roles that China could or will play in light of the situations in Gaza and in the current dynamics between the US, China and Iran?
You know, first of the fact that my parents came to Israel from China. They grew up in China, in Manchuria, in the northeast part of China, in the city of Harbin, which is now a big city. At that time it was slightly smaller. Today I think it's 20 million people or the like. And I do have a very, very deep and emotional attachment to China, because this is where my family came from. And I had very good relations with the Chinese leadership over a long period of time. I must say that I am disappointed that the Chinese chose to side with Iran. You know, if they would have criticized Israel for not handling a proper attitude towards the Palestinian Authority, that is, as I said, there are 2 aspects to it, or more aspects to it, but this is, I think, perfectly legitimate. But to side with Iran when they are completely dedicated to the liquidation of the state of Israel is disappointing. And I only hope, I think that China is a major power that will stay there as a major power and will have enormous influence on the affairs of the world. And I hope that they will somehow change. I think that the Chinese position is greatly affected by their now competition with America and the disagreements with America. And Israel is always considered to be part of America, so if they are against America, they are also against Israel. This is a mistake. If you have anything to do with China, it looks like. No? So tell them that this is a mistake.
And how do you strike the balance?
What?
And how do you strike the balance between, the dynamics between, say, US and China in light of the previous very friendly relationship between?
I think that China is not going to take over the whole world, and I think that some of the fears of America are grossly exaggerated. However, at the same time, I think that China should become a little bit more humble. They will not damage them.
Just finally, it's very patiently waiting in the middle, you and the pink.
Hi. In your opening remarks, you claim, or you call for ceasefire in the sense that
there have been 136 Israel hostages, and you prioritize that over the victory over Hamas, as well as the thousands of civilians' lives lost innocently in Palestine. So at this point, what can the public do, no matter what side you're on, to call for ceasefire, and what sort of influence do you think the public can have to call for ceasefire?
If you were from Qatar, I would have told you to go to the government of Qatar, who is probably somehow more direct relations with the Hamas, and tell them, listen, we are ready to stop the fighting right now. We want the hostages back home. So the question is, what else can be done? I think there are some Israelis, and I don't necessarily agree with them, that they think that more military pressure on Hamas will move them to do what right now they are not prepared to do, which is to bring back all the hostages. And I don't want to wait until I find out, because I'm afraid that by then there will be many less hostages alive. Because under the best of circumstances, they are held in the worst possible human conditions. And so we're using the Americans, the Qataris, the Egyptians, all the others, and tell them, listen, we are prepared to stop.
And is it correct, like my opening statement, that you value those hostage lives more than the victory over Hamas and more than the innocent civilian lives, 36,000?
I think that the lives of 136,000 Israelis that were abducted from their homes, from the living rooms, amongst them 85 years and 88 years old and 1-year-old baby, 1-year-old baby, and so on. I think that saving their lives is a great victory. And if I have to choose between this and 50 more Palestinian terrorists killed, I'd rather have them alive and them not killed.
And you also acknowledge that there are babies being...
What?
There are also babies that are being innocently killed by the hands of the
definitely, if there will be an end of the fighting, they will not be killed also.
Yeah, and do you then concede, if you value the lives of the hostages more than sort of continuing this war, do you think that Hamas can be eradicated militarily? I mean, do you subscribe to this idea that the Israeli government has put forward, that if we keep pounding them, they will cease to exist?
I don't think that Hamas can be annihilated. I think that they can be eradicated militarily. I think that we can destroy the bunkers, their tunnels, the hundreds of kilometers of tunnels, and all these, or most of these, will be destroyed, all the weapons. The fact is that they were shooting 100 or 300 rockets every day. Now they shoot once every 5 days, which shows that they had lost much of their weapons, so which has definitely weakened the military capacity. So I think, yes, we can weaken Hamas militarily dramatically. I never thought that we can annihilate Hamas, and I said from the outset that I think that this is not a realistic expectation, and there are reasons, political reasons for Netanyahu to announce it, but I don't accept it as a realistic expectation that can be achieved. All right, folks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.